Okay, it's 11:40, so I think we're due to start. So my name is Ben Woods. I'm going to be presenting an introduction to FreeBSD Ports. And I noticed when I was starting to prepare this slide that it was 25 years since ports were originally created. So there will be a little bit of history in there as well. Yes, that QR code does actually work even with the logo in the middle. I was surprised by that myself. So a little bit about me. I'm a FreeBSD Ports committer. I've only been a committer since 2016, so I'm pretty new to this myself. So there are much more experienced ports committers out there. So I'm almost like junior in the community, if you like. I maintain 59 ports at the moment. I think that grew to 60 the other day, and I've done about 440 commits to the ports tree, and that's to the head branch. Why did I get involved? I was using FreeBSD and I wanted some programs improved, and so I just started contributing patches, and before you know it, I was punished with a commit bit. A little bit about that later. But this is just a hobby for me. I use FreeBSD at home for all of my machines. It's not related to my day job. I work in oil and gas. I'm an instrument controls engineer, and despite a few efforts, I have been unable to link my hobby with my personal job to date. But before I progress, I just wanted to get a show of hands in the room. Who's used FreeBSD ports? Okay, that's 2/3. Another show of hands. Who knows how they work under the hood? Well, that's a few less hands, a couple. Okay, so hopefully you'll get that out of today's talk. So a little bit of an agenda. What are ports? How are you supposed to use them? How they work under the hood? If you want to start developing ports, how to do that, and then also what the process is like to become a FreeBSD Ports committer. And a little bit on Poudre if we have time. I've got a pretty action-packed agenda, so we may run out of time for that. We'll see how we go. So, first of all, what are ports? Right, so you've just finished installing your shiny new FreeBSD install. You've logged in as root. You've got a nice terminal there. Now what? So you try and run some commands that you might want. You might want to start an X session, run Firefox, run GIMP, anything. You can see a list of commands there. You're going to get a command not found. FreeBSD does have a lot of fantastic tools in base, but it doesn't have a graphical desktop, for example, and there's a lot of things that you're going to want. So to make almost any FreeBSD installation useful, you're going to turn to ports. So ports, the FreeBSD App Store before the term was claimed as a trademark. I think Apple's venture into that was actually declined by the courts, but they tried to trademark the term App Store. So what are ports? They're essentially formulas that simplify installing third-party packages. And these formulas include all the typical steps to download and install software on a FreeBSD machine. So that includes giving you the option to configure build time options for any program, but it'll go and download the program from the developer's website. It'll extract it onto your file system, apply any local patches. It'll run through a configure step and then actually do the compile, and then it'll stage the installation, package it up, and then finally install it on your machine. So it's a little bit different to how you would install packages on Windows. Normally on Windows, if you want to install Firefox, you're going to be browsing to mozilla.org. But like on Linux, when you want to install Firefox, it's all done for you. So you don't have to go to the upstream developer's website. You just type package install Firefox, and it knows how to do that. The bonus of FreeBSD Ports is that it provides a really consistent way to install any application. I know if I install a port, I'm going to find it under /user/local and probably /bin underneath that. And the user experience is consistent across any program. If you're going to start a service, it's going to install an rc.d script for you, and that's often done by the FreeBSD Ports team to make it so it's really nice and easy. So who makes these apps? Well, the ports team don't actually develop all these 30,000 something programs. That's done by the upstream developers, yay for open source. What we're doing is we're making sure those programs work on FreeBSD and providing the formula to download and install those programs. Often these days that requires local modifications to the programs because more and more programs these days are being written with Linux in mind and using Linux kernel calls or Linux userland tools that aren't sort of part of POSIX. And so we have to patch the program to translate that Linuxism into the way you would do that on FreeBSD. So a little bit of history. Ports is now celebrating its 25th anniversary. Well, it did last year. Ports were created by Jordan Hubbard. He was one of the original FreeBSD founders. In 1994, he committed the first ports framework, and in 1993, he committed the package install tools that was used to install packages. That's subsequently been deprecated by the new package system. There is a good Wikipedia page on ports history there. I reached out to Jordan Hubbard last week and got a quote from him for this presentation, and I'll just read through it, so bear with me. So the ports collection arose out of nothing more significant than sheer laziness on my part. I was installing a lot of FreeBSD machines from scratch in those days, particularly as I was provisioning a lot of new servers to deal with our growth. And I got really tired of grabbing source tarballs from various FTP sites, unpacking them, applying any necessary patches, and then configuring, building, and installing them. It's hard to remember this now, but in the days before pretty much everything you was packaged in binary form, you had to build everything from source. There was no recipe for doing this, you just did it by hand using memory, tribal knowledge about what configuration flags to use and environment variables to set. That's quote 1 of 5, so stick with me. All of this was incredibly labor intensive, and I was already something of a ninja at using make. Having written at least one version of make myself in the same decade, so I decided to use BSD's make robust macro mechanism to see if I could generalize and automate all of the work I was doing. From the initial idea to the first proof of concept implementation, it was 24 hours, which I think is pretty amazing. He got the first few ports done the next day and then went back and refactored the macro files, went through some more iterations before committing the first version of the macros as well as my reference ports. There's a link there to the first 70 ports. Once we got 300 ports or so, I managed to hand responsibility for the whole thing to Satoshi Asamai, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was the first portmeister and responsible for truly refining and scaling ports collection up significantly, as well as recruiting the first group of ports committers. The project owes Satoshi and the initial ports committers a significant debt of gratitude for really taking it to the next level. I can't believe there are over 32,000 ports today. I think it's amazing that he managed to start something up and then hand it off very quickly. That's anyone in open source knows that's a skill. Some fun facts and not so fun facts. Jordan wrote the package management tools and started publishing binary packages before he wrote the ports collection, which baffles the mind. I don't really know how that works. So I had to later go to a considerable amount of work to make the two systems work together. With the benefit of hindsight, I would have done ports first and packages second, yielding a better architecture, but we eventually fixed that. The next quote is a little bit of an insight into Jordan and his personal life. He lives with 14 cats and 7 dogs, so I've replaced software husbandry with animal husbandry, though the pets are a lot cuter than a lot of software I've seen over the days. All right, enough history. I thought I'd cover a little bit of similar frameworks to FreeBSD Ports. So as I said, FreeBSD Ports came in, was it 1993, 1994, I can't really remember. And so Debian created their depackage tool at around the same time. NetBSD got package source a few years later. Red Hat's RPM tool came in around that same time. Another year later, Debian created the apt tool that you've probably come to know and love. Yum was created a year after that. And Arch Linux created Pacman in 2002. The reason I bring that up is because it's kind of similar in a way to FreeBSD Ports. The other ones are a little bit different, but Arch Linux was quite heavily inspired, I think, by FreeBSD. And in the same year, Gentoo's Portage came out, and that was also directly inspired by FreeBSD, and you can see a quote there. Most of all, I was impressed with the FreeBSD Ports system. This is from the Gentoo developer. The technology used to maintain and upgrade the system. Unlike the Linux approach, Ports didn't use binary packages, but instead automatically compiled everything locally from their original sources. I'm pleased to say today you no longer have to do that. You can if you choose, but package install Firefox works just fine, so you don't have to build from source. And then the other thing that Arch Linux has done, which I quite like and wouldn't mind introducing to BSD at some point, is the Arch user repository. And I guess the point here is that you can't just commit, any old person can't just commit new packages to the Arch Linux repository. You have to be a known element in the community and be given those privileges. But you can just go and create an account on the Arch user repository and just go start committing things. And then if you're using Arch Linux, you can pull packages from the Arch user repository. So it's a really interesting idea. I mean, I guess you if it's broken as an end user, you kind of use it at your own, there's no guarantees of the Arch user repository, but it's a nice way to get users and new developers into a community. So maybe it's a good idea for BSD at some point. Right, so what's in FreeBSD base? So I guess what's all this talk about FreeBSD ports when you've got a FreeBSD base operating system? We keep on saying FreeBSD is a complete operating system. What does that mean? So you've got your kernel and your device drivers, your man pages, and all your userland utilities that come with FreeBSD. So those are things like your ls commands, find, you have VI text editors. Note that Emacs doesn't come with BSD. And then you've got system administration and networking tools like ifconfig, netstat, route. They're all part of the FreeBSD base. You have some virtualization and container tools like Beehive and Jails. Even OpenSSH is built in, both the client and the server. You can fetch things. OpenSSL is built in. There's a bunch of developer tools, CC, make. So there's a huge amount of stuff you can do with a base FreeBSD install. So what do we need ports for? Well, in ports, you'll find, and the number is now 38,290 different programs, so it's growing pretty rapidly. If you want a graphical desktop environment, KDE, GNOME, XFCE, you're going to be turning to ports. If you want a web browser, you're going to be turning to ports. If you want office tools, ports. Graphics tools, audio, video tools, chat, web servers, mail servers, databases, developer tools and languages, configuration management tools like Ansible, Puppet, they're all in ports. So that's what you need ports for. So, I keep on talking about the number of ports growing. This is a timeline provided by freshports.org of the number of ports in the tree. So you can see it when they started recording in 2003 or so. That's obviously not when ports started. It's just when FreshPorts started. It was at around the sort of 7,500 range there, and it's pretty consistent growth. If anything, it seems to be speeding up lately, so it's really not plateauing. And all of that means we need more ports developers because maintaining 38,000 programs is tough. Right, so next section, how to use ports. My advice is don't use ports. You're not really supposed to use ports today to maintain packages on your system. The days of building packages from source and installing them, for me, I would not recommend that to anyone. Even if you want to customize your programs to have a different compile time option, I would say don't use ports to do that directly. What you should do is use package. And so don't use ports for installing programs in your machine. Use package for that. Don't combine ports and packages. Why am I saying this? Using ports directly does work in some simple cases, and a lot of people still do it, and that's almost a bit of a frustration in the ports developer community that people are still using ports directly. The big issue with that is the output of a port build varies depending on what other programs you have installed on your machine. So if you're doing a make on your machine, do you already have some Python scripts installed on your machine, and that's going to see them and pull them in as dependencies? So you really don't have a clean build environment. This results in bugs, and when port maintainers are trying to troubleshoot those bugs, we're like, works for me, I can't replicate your problem. So if you are going to be building ports, you should be doing so in a clean environment. Do use ports for building packages in a clean environment should you choose to. There's a really nice tool called Poudriere for that. I'll talk a bit about that later. And then use these package management tools to install the programs that you've built from ports. The FreeBSD project does do this for you, so you don't need to build ports. FreeBSD provides a whole bunch of infrastructure which is continuously busy building ports. So you only need to do it if you want to customize the packages and the build options. So what is this difference between ports and packages? So ports are those formulas for how to download, build, and install a program. Typically, this means compiling from source, which is time-consuming, and it will download the program from the upstream developer's code repo. I'll keep using this term upstream. What I mean by that is, Mozilla.org for Firefox is upstream, whereas the ports is downstream. So packages are the pre-compiled binaries which are ready for you to install. They're generated using the formulas from ports. And when you download packages, you're not downloading them from the upstream developer's website, you're downloading from the FreeBSD package repo. So these are available in the FreeBSD package repo, and they're updated every few days. And you can make your own package repo should you choose to. So I want to start how to use ports with how to use packages. It's easy. You just do a package update to download the catalog of the 30-something thousand. This is saying there's 31,770 packages downloaded there, as you can see. And then you can do a package search for your favorite package. And once you find the one you're looking for, you just do a package install, and it'll pull it down and install it really quickly. So that's how you should use packages. What about when I want to upgrade to the latest packages? Every few days they're rebuilt. Simple package upgrade command, and it'll pull down the latest one for you. So how do I configure repos and packages? Well, one thing people may not realize is FreeBSD out of the box comes with, it'll use the quarterly package repo, and essentially all daily ports development by the ports occurs in the head branch, which is still quite stable. You're not supposed to commit things to ports head unless it works and it's been tested. But there's a quarterly branch which is copied from head at the start of every quarter, and only security updates and bug fixes get backported from the head branch to the quarterly branch. So if you're the type of person that prefers things to be stable and you don't really want to be pulling down the new version of GNOME and Firefox every single day, because system administration is supposed to be a background task, not necessarily the way you use your computer daily, then quarterly is probably for you. If you're the type of person that wants cutting-edge packages, then you can get that too. You just use the latest branch. So one thing I sometimes find confusing is the difference in language. So in packages, the term latest correlates to the term head in ports, and the term quarterly is a branch that'll look like branches /2020 Q1, for example. And so if you open up the file etc package freebsd.conf, you'll see some instructions in the comments at the top here, which is essentially saying if you want to disable this branch, then don't edit the etc package freebsd.conf file. Create a new file in user local etc package repos freebsd.conf and put enabled no there. And then you would obviously, if you're going to do that, you'd be creating another file saying, well, the package repo that I want to use is over there, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. You can see here that by default it's using the quarterly branch, and you would change that to latest if you wanted to use the latest branch. So here's a slide on that actually, and then once you've changed that line, you run package update, and then to pull down the new catalog from the latest package repo, and package upgrade to apply the packages. Pretty straightforward. All right, so how to use ports if you must. Remember, I recommend probably not doing this. The first thing I'd say is read the FreeBSD Handbook. There's a really good ports chapter that everything that I'm about to tell you is clearly documented there and gives a little bit more of a narrative as to why and how it works, etc. So step one is actually to install a package, which is a little bit... Sorry about that. A little bit backwards. I'll just pick that up and fix it as I'm going. So the reason you have to install package first is because ports build packages, and so there's really a dependency if you're going to start using ports to build packages. Sorry, I've gone one step ahead there. So ports build packages, but you also need to be able to verify you've got a secure HTTPS connection to the ports tree that you're downloading. So you need to download some SSL root certificates that you're going to trust, and so you really need to install these two packages first. Once you've done that, you'll download the ports tree, and if you, during the FreeBSD install, you had an option to install a ports tree, if you did that, this is where you delete that, because that's baked and it's static at the time of a FreeBSD install, whereas probably what you want in your ports tree is something that you update almost on a daily basis to be the latest ports tree. So the first thing I would do is rm-rf user ports, and then the other little trick here is, unless you want to be building ports as root all the time, which I don't really recommend, then you want to make sure that a certain number of folders are owned by a user that's not the root user. Otherwise, you'll have to be root every time you're building ports. So come up with your favorite user that you're going to build ports with, and change 3 folders: user ports, vardb ports, and vardb portsnap to be owned by that user. So now I'm going to talk through 2 ways that you can download that ports tree. The first is port snap. This is the fast method, and probably what a lot of users would want to do. But if you want to be contributing to ports, creating patches for ports, you really want to be using Subversion, which FreeBSD's version control system is Subversion. A lot of other open source communities have moved to Git. I quite like Subversion, actually. It works for me. But yeah, the original pull down of the ports tree using Subversion is a little bit slower by an order of magnitude. So be patient if you want to use that version. So using port snap, you type the command port snap fetch, and it will download the ports tree. And then you type the command port snap extract, and it will extract the ports tree into your user ports directory. Now I'll just point out a little bit of syntax here. You see how I've used a $sign on the left? That syntax means that you're not a root user. So you're not having to do this, run this command as root. You're a non-privileged user. If you see instead of that a hash at the start of the line, that means you have to be root to run this command. And so whenever you want to update your ports tree, whether that's daily, weekly, up to you, you run port snap fetch update, and it'll pull down the latest updates. I ran this command when I was preparing these slides about 20 minutes later. I wasn't expecting there to be any updates, but as you can see, it pulled down seven patches in that 20 minutes. So port snap is up to date quite regularly. So the slightly slower version, if you don't want to use port snap, if you want to be able to generate ports and contribute to generate patches and contribute to ports, you would install. You could use devel subversion, which is where you can actually install subversion from ports, which is a little bit recursive and iterative. You need to use ports to. You have to download subversion from ports in order to use ports. But base does come with a command called svn lite. And you can do basically everything with that you need to. And so the command that you would use is svn checkout, and then point it to the upstream subversion repository, and then also where on your file system you'd like your ports to live, which is typically user ports. And it'll do that. I've got a little ... here. There's thousands of lines printed out there as it downloads all 38,000 ports, and it was at least half an hour. It takes a long time. But then whenever you want to update your ports tree, you just cd into your ports directory and run svn up or svn lite up if you're using that version. Once you're doing updates, that's pretty quick. It's just the first pull down of the ports tree that takes a while. All right, so let's install our first port. I'm going to install Dialog for Ports, which is a program that actually helps you use the ports tree. If your program that you're trying to install has build time options, for example, do you want to turn on Samba functionality in this program or not? It'll pop up a blue dialog box, which we'll see later, and say, do you want this option or not? That is actually provided by a port called Dialog for Ports. So you would cd into user ports, ports management Dialog for Ports, and then you'd do a make install clean, and it'll download the program, build the program, install the program, and then clean up after itself. Pretty easy. We're going to dive into a little bit more of what that's actually doing in a moment. That's just the rest of the build command there. And so let's install our second program now. Let's install the package tool again, and this time we'll do it from ports. And so we'll cd into user ports management pkg, and then we'll do a make install clean. And we're presented with this options dialog, which is what I was talking about before. The Dialog for Ports tool is the one that's actually providing this pop-up and options to select. So here you have the option to turn on, do you want to install the documentation with pkg or not? So you just hit spacebar to select that or not, and then you'd hit OK to move on. Once you do that, it downloads the program, and you can see ... There's a bunch of build output, and then it throws an error. And you can see that here. And what it's saying is that, hey, you've already got package installed. You did that earlier when you typed that pkg command. So why are you installing it again? So if you want to install the new version, you've actually got to run the make reinstall command. And that will essentially uninstall the old version and install the new version. And then that'll finish cleanly. So you want to find the ports for your computer. There's a nice website, freshports.org, that looks like this. And let's say you're looking for the lsof command. You would just type that in the top, and you get two versions pop out. There's the main LSOF. This is probably what you're looking for, and there's some Perl version or a Perl wrapper for LSOF. So now you've found the name of the port you want to install is LSOF there, and you can also see which branch it's in. It's in the which category it's in, the sysutils folder there. So you're going to want to go to cd/user ports sysutils LSOF and then do your make install clean. But you haven't installed a web browser yet. You're on your computer and you don't have a browser. So you can do this on the command line as well. So you cd into user ports, you run a command make fetch index. It'll pull down the index of your entire ports tree. And then the command you can use is make search name equals LSOF. And then you'll get basically the same output that you just got from FreshPorts, but in a terminal. The nice thing about this as well is that it shows you what dependencies the programs have. So LSOF doesn't depend on anything. So you've got BDEPs, which are build time dependencies, and RDEPs, runtime dependencies, whereas the Perl program here does have a few other dependencies. This slide took me a while to prepare, but it's one of my favorites. I hope you like it too. The individual make steps that are run by the ports framework. This is essentially, if you cd into a port and you just type make, that you're taking this stream on the right-hand side. So it's going to do all of these steps one by one, and eventually run a make package and stop there. So if you just type make, it actually doesn't install the port on your system. What has it done? Well, it's gone through the configure step, it's done a bit of a sanity check, it's downloaded the upstream source, it's done a checksum to make sure it's not corrupted, it's extracted it, patched it, run a configure, built it, installed it in a staging directory, and then made a package, and then stopped there. So you could choose to then do a package add of that package. That's how you could then go and install that on your machine. But if you run another step here, you can just run make install, and then it'll install that package for you. And then make clean cleans up the working directories that were used to perform all of these steps. And then you've got make deinstall and make reinstall. And then if you ever want to run this config step again, you can clear that back to default if you want by running make rmconfig. The nice thing about make as well is that you can string these together and it'll run them in order. So you can write make clean install clean, for example. And so when you do a make clean, sorry, make clean is where it got make clean. So make clean is here. It doesn't actually depend on all these other ones, so it'll run the clean steps. And then the next thing you said was install. And so it will do all of these steps here and then do an install. And then the last command you had was clean, and so it'll do another clean at the end. All right, so how do these things work under the hood? What is this ports tree? It's really just a bunch of make files. So they're really nice make files. They provide a standard macros, set of standard macros for common tasks. For those who don't know what make files are, they're really instructions to direct the make command on how to compile, link, and install programs. It consists of rules in the following format, and this is a generic make file. This isn't ports make files. So the structure is you have a target, and for example, what a target means is make install. Well, install was your target. Make clean was your target. So you have your target, then a colon. You list any make dependencies. So if you're going to do a make install, well, that's going to rely, that depends that you've done make package before, and make package depends that you've done a make stage, and make stage depends that you've done a make build. And so each of those has a dependency string up the chain. And then once you say, what is it, once we've satisfied all the dependencies, what does this target actually do? And it's just a bunch of commands there. So you could write echo hello in that line there, and that would mean that the make clean command would just print hello and not actually do anything useful. As I was saying here, you just string your make and then targets together, and you could have clean, install clean if you want. So the ports framework, these are pretty amazing makefiles. As far as makefiles go, these are whoppers. And so as I was saying before, the ports framework does all of this for you, but the magic actually exists in this line here. And you'll see that line at the bottom of every single port. Every single one of those 38,000 ports has that line at the bottom. What does that do and how does it work? So each individual port, in addition to that line, all they define is a set of variables. Those variables are things like, what is the name of this port? Where do I find the upstream files that I'm going to fetch? Is there any custom steps for when I go to do a patch? They're just a bunch of variables inside ports. They might also override some of the make targets. So the way that you need to do a configure for this port is slightly different to others. So you might override some of these steps that are defined by the generic ports framework. And then you just include bsd.port.make at the bottom. When I was actually trying to work out how does that work, I realized I didn't know either. So I had to go do a little bit of research. And so I typed man make, and I opened the make man page. And it turns out, it explains in there that there's a default system include path for make. And that default system include path is this folder, user share mk. And in there, you'll find a bsd.port.make. And I was like, hang on a minute. But that folder is part of FreeBSD base. I thought bsd.port.make was part of FreeBSD ports, which is a completely separate source tree. Or, so how does that work? And so I opened up this file here, and really it just points you to your ports tree and says run the bsd.port.make file that lives in your ports tree over there. So it's just a wrapper, if you like, or a shim layer that points to your ports tree. So that's how that command works there. And so once it works out where your ports tree is, it then does include in there to include ports to make bsd.port.make, and that's the big one. That's the proper bsd.port.make. bsd.port.make is the main one, but it'll include a bunch of other make files that are part of the broader ports framework as and when it needs to, depending on the variables that you've defined in your port. So for example, if you put users equals gnome, then that's going to include mk users gnome.make. So that's part of the broader ports framework. So the main subset of the ports make files is these ones here in user ports mk star. And what you can see on the left-hand side there is the number of lines of code in that file. And so you can see a lot of these here are pretty small. But the main one, which is bsd.port.make, where's that run away to here, is 5,393 lines of makefile. That's a good one. I do actually recommend opening that up and reading it. It starts with a whole bunch of comments. There's like hundreds of lines of comments at the start of the file that actually explains how it works. It's almost the best documentation for how ports work is in that file. So if you're interested, open it up, have a look. But then, as I was saying, there's a whole bunch of users files as well, and this is some of the examples there. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip on. There's a bunch of ports categories, so any program should be able to be categorized in these folders. There's also some virtual categories, so you can have, maybe Firefox is in one category, but also a second category. All physical categories will have a make file that just defines all the subdirs. So if you're going to add a new port, you have to add it to this list here. All right, ports development, some examples. Step one, read the FreeBSD Porters Handbook. This is not the FreeBSD Handbook, it's a separate book called the FreeBSD Porters Handbook. It's really long, but it's really good. I don't necessarily recommend reading from top to bottom. It's more of a reference guide, so when you're trying to work out how to do something in ports, this is a really good guide on how to do it. So we're going to step through how to create a new port, and I'm going to create the textproc/aha port. You may not have heard of this program, but I actually found it in the process of making these slides, and I made it a couple of days ago as a process of making these slides. So I committed this new port only a few days ago. So first step, check the port doesn't exist. I've made this mistake a couple of times myself. I've committed a new port and found out, whoopsie doopsie, it was over there in that other category. I just miscategorized it. So do a bit of a search around. Next step is make sure you make that index entry in the category make file that I was talking about before. Then you've got to create the port skeleton, which essentially exists of a ports make file, and I created this initial skeleton here, and it defines things like, well, where do you download this from? Well, it's GitHub, and the GitHub account is the Ziz, and then you have to define a maintainer, and this is a bit of, basically you're promising to maintain this port. Define a little bit about the license. The nice thing about this program is it has a dual license. It can be under the lesser GPL or the Mozilla public license, or either, which suits you. And then, of course, the magic include bsd.port.make at the bottom. There's another file called package description, and this, pretty clear what it does. It provides a long description of what the program does and a website. And then you need to define the size of the upstream package that is going to be downloaded and a checksum for it, so that all future people that download it can actually check that it wasn't corrupted during download. So you run this magic command called makesum, and it will download the port, the upstream, and then create the distinfo file for you. It'll run the checksum and save all the details in there, and you can see that here. It's created the distinfo file. You also need to, if you're going to create a new port, you better go read the build instructions that come with that upstream program to make sure that you're following what the original developers planned for how you would actually build that program. So you can do that now by doing a make extract. You'll have the source tree on your file there, on your machine, and then you can just do a less of their README. And you can see here they provide a bit of an instruction. And this particular program doesn't even have a configure stage. You literally just run make. But this isn't a make in the ports tree, it's a make within their source tree. So our ports make is going to call their make, if that makes sense. Reviewing the upstream make file, this is what it looks like. Pretty standard, really. So it looks like it should just work trademark. So now we run the portlint command, and essentially this is going to check that our new port matches a few rules that we typically use. And so it prints out, looks fine. Okay, good. So I haven't made any obvious errors in my port to date. So I'll test the build. So you can see here I run a make clean stage, and in the process it spits out a build warning. This is just a difference between the way GCC and LLVM work, but it's only a warning, so I'm going to ignore that one. And then the build continues, and it spits out a new warning at the end here saying the bin aha command is not stripped. Essentially, the ports framework, you're supposed to make sure you strip all binaries. So we need to fix this. We add a new line to our ports make file, post install, and you run the strip command on that binary after it's been staged. And if you want to know what the strip command does, within your port, you can run make-V and then strip _ command, and that'll show you what that variable actually is. So it's user bin strip. And if you want to know what that variable is, staged-dir, you can do the same, and lastly for prefix as well. And these are all depending on the variables defined in your port. So it's a nice way to sort of debug your port and see what these variables are going to expand to. You have to define in your port every single file that will be installed by this port, and that's called a package plist. But rather than do it yourself, you can run the command make plist, and it'll stage the port, find out all files that were installed, and create a plist for you. The only thing is it does spit out this at the top of the plist, /u/half/ to check what make plist gives you. And it's saying don't just trust this, apply brain first. Also, given that there's only two files installed by this port, you really don't want to use a package plist file. Just define this in your make file. So you can, instead of having a package plist file, just add 2 lines in your make file that look like that. I'm going to do a bit of an iterative development process and run another portlint. What does it look like now? And portlint now spits out a few more warnings, or actually these are errors. It's saying, your package plist, you're not supposed to install man pages in share man. You're supposed to install them in man. And going back and looking, so we need our plist to change like that. So going back and looking at the original make file that comes with this program, I noticed that there's an option you can add to make called mandir. And so essentially within our port, we now need to add in our port make file, you add a make_args, mandir equals man prefix /man, and that'll fix this now so that your man pages will be installed in the correct place on the file system. Got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to start skipping forward a little bit, but you can get all these slides online afterwards if you want. So now we run a make clean install again. Get that same build warning before, ignore that. And it finishes, it installs. That's great. So we've got a working port. We do a make deinstall and a make clean just to make sure that it tidies up after itself. And that's what the final make file looks like after we've added our new make args there to fix the mandir location, and we've added in our plist entry, and we've added in our strip command. So this is now the final port make file. So if you want to capture all this in a diff, you can use Subversion to do that. If you created your ports tree with Subversion, so you just simply cd into your port folder, run a make clean to make sure you've tidied up, go up to the root of your ports tree and make sure you've done an svn add to add in all the files that are in your new port. CD again to make sure at the root, do an svn status, and you can see, yep, these are the local changes that your ports tree has that aren't in the main ports tree. And then you can run a svn diff command, and that'll spit out a diff, and you can save it to a file. But you're not a ports committer, so you can't commit that to the ports branch. So you have to create a bug report. It's not really a bug, it's more of a feature request. You're asking for a new port, but this is a new port with a patch attached. So you're not just saying, please someone go and do the effort. I've done the effort, here's the port. We love these as ports committers. These are all singing, all dancing bug reports. So then some ports committer comes along and we'll have to commit that to the ports tree. So essentially once we've downloaded your patch and applied it, we just run the svn commit, and we make sure we're capturing both the category makefile changes and also your new port, and it'll commit it to the ports tree. So only ports committers can do this, but as I've got a little flag down the bottom here that if you are a source committer or a docs committer, you can also commit this, but you'll just need to get approval from a ports committer. When we create commit messages that explain what's happening, so the commit message says, you know, we're going to add a new port, give a bit of a description on what the port is, and this is just some prompts that as I'm creating the commit message tell me what I should consider, including my commit message. And then behold, your new port is available up on freshports.org, and within a few days you'll be able to package install AHA, and that should work. Given that I did this a few days ago, I think the new package run probably includes this, and you can install this new port today. So I'm going to skip over my next one, which was how to update an existing port. The slides are available should you choose to use them. Pretty similar, really. How you can contribute to the ports tree in FreeBSD. Submit patches using Bugzilla, as I showed you before. Well, what patches are we looking for? What needs work? Well, with 38,000 ports, some of them are broken, and they've marked broken. The actual make file now will have broken written in the make file. So we've worked it out. We know that it's broken, but we haven't worked out how to fix it, and so we've put broken into the make file. So how can you find those ports? There's a link there. So feel free to click the link, find a broken port, and fix it. That'd be great. I'll be happy to commit that for you. Outdated ports, so ports where there's a new version available upstream. There's a great tool called Port Scout that automatically tries to find where what we've got in ports is out of date with what's upstream. Ports without a maintainer, so the original maintainer has given up, and maybe they've given many years of service, but they no longer want to maintain the FreeBSD port, and it's been reset to ports at freebsd.org is listed as the maintainer. That's code for no one's maintaining this. Every now and then a ports committer will come along and do their best, but if you feel like adopting a port, go nuts. And also submit new ports. If you're looking in the ports tree and you find that your favorite program isn't in there, then yeah, feel free to submit those new ports. I was going to talk a little bit about the process for becoming a ports committer, but I'm out of time. Suffice it to say that the original time I was proposed as a ports committer, it was denied. And essentially they said, look, come back in a few years when you've got a bit more experience. You don't just become a ports committer on day one. So I came back a year later, and it was granted. And I was assigned 3 mentors, Adam, W, Cubes, and Matt. These are pretty powerful players in the ports community, so I was lucky with my mentors. And so I just want to give a bit of a shout out to my mentors that helped me become a ports committer. Those guys are legends. And lastly, I was going to talk a bit about Poudriere, but I'll have to skip over it. You can see it's got a nice web interface to show you what it's doing. It essentially allows you to bulk build ports in parallel. I've heard people say that it's hard to set up Poudriere. That's every command you need to type to set up Poudriere, so it's really not that hard. It has some nice console output as well, and it's colorized to show you what it's doing as it's bulk building ports. And if you want to have that web interface, that's how you have your nginx config, and that's how you point your local machines, the package command on all your other machines that you want to use your new fancy package repo that you've created with Poudriere. That's how you do it. So, what are you waiting for? I'm here all week. If you want to come up and grab me and ask me, hey, how do I get involved in ports? I'll be more than willing to talk you through that. And that's everything I had. Any questions? Elongated clap at the back there. So it is lunch, so don't feel like you're holding people back from lunch. We've got time for a couple of questions.